Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. I am Jack Fowler, and I am the director of the Center for Civil Society at American Philanthropic. And we're here today with one of our, I think this is our fifth webinar, and we're going to be looking today at the pitfalls and opportunities that come with higher ed giving, and how donor intent is abused and how it needs to be protected, and maybe in some ways how it is being protected, and in pushback by some donors. We have two of the three so far. We're expecting number three to join us momentarily. We have three great speakers joining us. Let me just give a little précis about the Center for Civil Society, and then I will introduce our participants, and then we'll begin our conversation. The center strengthens America's voluntary associations by improving the effectiveness of donors, charitable foundations, and nonprofit organizations. The center fulfills its mission through education, providing research, publications, webinars, master classes, and in-person events. One of them is a conference we're having April 6th in Florida on democracy and philanthropy in America, and we'll be talking about that in a little bit. These resources offer practical advice, ideas, training, and tools that help civil society leaders achieve their mission. Today, this webinar is for givers, doers, and thinkers. The subject is rethinking higher ed giving, pitfalls, and opportunities. And we will have shared with us battle stories and show that there are indeed some promising methods of dealing with the wily ways of college development schemers or officers, however you want to label that. Present company, not included. Focusing the attention of donors to the pitfalls of college giving, while also spotlighting worthwhile opportunities and alternatives so that donors' heartfelt philanthropic dollars will truly match their beliefs, is a task that can't be performed too frequently. Let's see what we can achieve in 1 hour. So we have three invited panelists today. The one is Richard Coyle. Richard's here. Richard is a retired Fortune 100 consultant, and he was a visiting lecturer at Rutgers University's School of Business and Accounting. Richard lives in Arizona, but for the past decade, his thoughts have often been in the Badger State, where the University of Wisconsin sorely abused the gift his family made to honor his father. Richard's is a cautionary account. We appreciate his participating today as he continues his efforts to promote the need for greater protection of donor intent. Carl Noyce, who will we hope and pray will be joining us very shortly, is a graduate of Cornell University and the Harvard Business School. A civil engineer early in his career, he is a principal at the California-based Woodbridge Pacific Group and the Foremost Pacific Group. These are real estate, venture investment, and enterprise development firms. He is one of the founders of the Cornell Free Speech Alliance, which is comprised mostly of alumni donors or non-donors, refusing donors, who are troubled by the state of free speech, academic freedom, and viewpoint diversity at their prestigious Ivy League alma mater. And last, but I mean not least, Emily Coons Jay is the director of the Fund for Academic Renewal, which is a program of the American Council of Trustees and Alumni. She works closely with higher ed donors to design, monitor, and evaluate transformative gifts that meet their philanthropic objectives. Her work helps alumni reach out to faculty and university officials in order to structure their giving. That's very important, to be effective agents for a long overdue course correction at their institutions. Emily is a graduate of Davidson College, which, as we will hear later, like Carl and his Cornell associates, they've launched a pushback organization called Davidsonians for Freedom of Thought and Discourse. So we thank you for being here. Here's Carl. Carl, pleasure that you have joined us. I just gave you a wonderful introduction.
I can't hear anyone. Can anyone hear me?
We can hear you.
I hear you.
Okay, there it goes. How's that? Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Carl. Can you hear us?
I
Thanks
can.
for being here. Carl, thanks very much.
Definitely.
We're going to get started. I have a little introduction, and then I'm going to be starting off by asking Richard some questions about his experience. So here goes. School development offices, alumni associations, and school foundations publicly express a desire to engage with alumni donors in a trustworthy manner. That's the rhetoric. The deeds can be quite different. When it comes to donations for specific purposes, quote unquote, you have my word, may have worked once upon a time. Now it seems that a detailed contract may be called for. Trust has been diminished. From the position of the donor, the gift or bequest is often motivated by what? Affection, hope. It's an expression of happiness and goodwill. It assumes a bond. It is a thing of emotion. But the reality of how donor intentions have been handled and mishandled in recent years creates a dynamic whereby trust has given way to wariness. There is a sort of a sense of a prenuptial agreement going on. You know, the passion has dissipated. As the people, they want to do well, give well, they want to be happy, but wow, they've faced a bit of a coldness on the other side. So let's begin with you, Richard. I introduced you before, said that you had some issues with things in Wisconsin. Few people know the ways in which donor intent have been abused better than you do. So when you discuss, Richard, tell us this really troubling experience you had and your family with the University of Wisconsin, as your family made a bequest there to honor your father's experience at the school.
Thanks, Jack. Glad to be with you, Emily and Carl. Let me mention two examples that were instructive in our lives before we committed to Wisconsin. 20 years ago, my wife helped raise $3 million for EMTs, of which she was one in our small New Jersey town. They had a 3-year plan, but they raised all that money in 18 months. They were so successful that then a recreational group came along in our town and said, could we mimic your strategies and tactics, and we'll raise $7 million for youth recreational purposes. That worked very well. So we enjoyed the give back to the community, the ability to help mobilize, and the results of it. Then 10 years ago, we met two professional dancers who had fled Havana and one young acrobat who had fled Medellin. They formed a dance entertainment company in Aruba, 3 people. And now today, 10 years later, they're the 3rd ranked international acrobatic troupe in the world out of 400. They have 20 employees. They this year will be for 1 month in London, 3 months performing in Paris, and next week traveling to Los Angeles for America's Got Talent. Some of them have married and had children. Many of them have given money back to their parents and family to help them move into better neighborhoods in those 2 countries. Our role with them was simply a couple of bucks and a little mentoring. So all credits due to them. But those 2 examples have enriched our lives and taught us that we could do more and we could find people to do more. So with that in mind, we decided as a family to give $500,000 to the University of Wisconsin for an endowed scholarship in my father's name. He himself had been a 2-lettered scholarship athlete at Wisconsin, basketball and tennis. And his life, he always said, was ever enriched from those 4 years in Madison. So we gave them $500,000 in cash. I like to think of it as we paid them $500,000. We didn't give them, we paid them because there was some reciprocity involved. But at any rate, in June of 2016, they got $500K. Interestingly, that's the same amount, the highest amount that was involved in the federal varsity blues case that involved tennis programs at Georgetown and UT Austin, and 11 coaches or athletic directors, 500K. But within 60 days, the University of Wisconsin Foundation, Barry Alvarez Athletic Department, and regents violated their own policies, state laws, and even third-party ethics standards, and diverted the money from scholarships and an endowment into a capital expense account. They bought cement. They poured cement. They built one outdoor tennis court in the state of Wisconsin for use by student intramural tennis recreational clubs. So the result is that not one student has ever received a scholarship in 5 years. Not one tuition paying family has ever been relieved of ever increasing tuition bills. Wisconsin has stained itself with stewardship malpractice. The life lessons of Doug Coyle will never be transmitted. We will never be able to vicariously enjoy the hope for success of a young student athlete and contribute even more to them through name, image, and likeness, now allowed by the Supreme Court. Wisconsin's administrative activism violated stewardship standards and processes. And to us, it's an historic level of abuse and malpractice. They violated their own principles and policies and promises. The mission of the university is to provide a learning environment, to enhance the lives. Their actions don't do either of those. Thankfully, because of ACTA, we had an open records request at Wisconsin. And those documents and other research indicate violations of their own stewardship commitments. Their foundation promises, quote, refunds will be made in the event of a mistake. Donors will receive the highest level of financial accountability. The Alvarez Athletic Department promises for a minimum gift of $50,000. Endowments are invested funds that annually support student athletes. Their state statutes promise in 3629-4, quote, donor intent is established with documented extrinsic evidence. And statute 11211, stewardship, quote, requires the care an ordinary prudent person would exercise under similar circumstances and donor written consent to modify or release any restriction. There are at least 5 Wisconsin State Supreme Court decisions which have bearing on this. For example, in Gill, donor's subjective intent is determinative. In Salteri, a purpose which approximates as nearly as possible the purpose to which the donor intended is to be applied. But Wisconsin dismissed its own policies, laws, and didn't follow their own court rulings. They acted with unbounded power.
Yeah,
yes.
Richard, if you don't mind, because the clock's ticking a little bit here.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, essentially, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say, those are the facts. That's what happened.
Okay. So yeah, you gave your intention was totally dishonored, and we'll get later into your attempt to get a formal response. I'd like to move on to Carl. Carl, thanks for joining us. I'm going to crunch this a little bit. This isn't political. This isn't right or left, but Carl, the fact is, in right of center world, you've become a little bit of a star in the last few months, only because the Wall Street Journal did a significant article. Alumni withhold donations, demand colleges enforce free speech. That enlivened a lot of people on this issue of donor intent and pushback. So in the case of Richard's a family that gave money. You're in a case of someone who was solicited to give a significant gift, according to the article, 7-figure. And my understanding is you've not yet given the gift, and you did due diligence. Would you tell us about what happened, how you were approached, what the school did in response to your initial spider sense that was tingling, and discussing things with faculty members, and what came of all that as of today? So tell us your story.
Sure. Well, I have given, to Cornell University over the years, and supported I was a graduate of the engineering school. I taught at the graduate program in real estate, urban planning and real estate development. I supported various Christian ministries as well as the university in general. And I given, had as I got older, my gifts increased, and I guess I was identified as a potential larger donor. I mean, I'd probably given, in the six figures, and I identified apparently by the university as a larger donor, whatever the methods they use, and they assigned me over the course of a few-year period someone a development officer who would visit me on a regular basis, come to my home, chat about all things, including the university. And it worked up to the point of saying that he would like to propose a seven-figure gift to me, and the university wanted to work up three alternatives as to things that I could give to, ideas as to what I could give to. And I was open to that. They started that presentation. But another thing that had been on my mind, I had been teaching at the university on 3 different occasions, graduate courses. I've been called back to do that. I'm a business person. I own my own business, so it gave me the flexibility to do that. And while I was on campus during those times, over really the last decade, let's say, I become increasingly concerned as to what was happening at the university, and sort of a variety of things that made me think that it was leaning very strongly left, not only in the basic, the political outlook of most folks at the university, but also what was happening in the classroom, was happening extracurricularly, et cetera, as well as with admissions and DEI programs and various things. And so I said, look, before I proceed with thinking further about how much to give and what type of program I'd like to support, I'd like to understand a little bit more about these issues and these concerns that I have, and do I really think the university's purpose is pointed in the same direction of whatever my purpose would be for giving? And in response to that, they said, oh, absolutely, we have a very balanced university, we have very balanced perspectives. Next time you come out, which was actually going to happen a few months hence from then, let us take you around and let us introduce you to various folks to give you a sense of the balance of perspective that we have at the university. And they did a great job. They had half a dozen or so people that they set me up with, professors and student groups and various other people. But behind closed doors, when I talked to these people about, hey, what's going on, they were like appalled. In other words, it felt to me like the professors in particular felt like they were working and living in a Stalinist environment almost, where people were afraid of their own shadow, afraid of what to say, afraid of in class, afraid of sharing their viewpoints, afraid of getting crosswise if the research was pointed in the wrong direction, and just a general cancel culture environment they were deathly afraid of. And also, in the last couple of years, since I made the decision to hold off on giving, there have been various cancel cultural events that have occurred at the university. So basically, from all that, not only did I withhold my giving, but I was having these conversations with a few other friends from the university, and a few alumni that grew to a much larger group, and of common concern among alumni as well as faculty and students. And we ended up forming a little group called the Cornell Free Speech Alliance, which turned into a larger group. And now we're interacting with the university, and I'm directing my gifts to that alliance and trying to find ways to give to the university to try to bring balance back into the discourse of what's going on campus. So that's taking off. It's taken off over the last 6 years. That relates to the Wall Street Journal article that you mentioned, and there's a lot of interest in trying to push back and trying to set the course, set a better course for the university. We'll see if we succeed. It'll be a long battle.
Okay. Thanks, Carl. We'll talk a little more about the Free Speech Alliance in a little bit, and I'd like to bring Emily into this now. So, Emily, hey, you're the professional in the room here, in the Zoom room. Thanks, Emily. Tell us about the American Council of Trustees and Alumni, why it came into being, and then why it created the program that you run, the Fund for Academic Renewal. I have two-part questions. So that's one thing. Explain where you are and what its mission is. And then I would like you to try and paint for us a picture of the, and not comically, but the typical, and I don't know if Carl or Richard, the typical high-end college donor, potential donor, but what is the typical person like? And because I have a prejudice, I think they have rose-colored glasses that come when it comes to their alma mater that may be very different than when they consider another charity to give to. But your experience, you have the greatest experience in dealing with potential donors. So tell us about ACTA, tell us about the fund, and tell us about the typical donor.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And thanks so much for hosting this conversation on what I think is an urgently important topic. So to tackle the first part of your question, and you gave a really excellent introduction to what ACTA does, so I'll keep this brief. But the American Council of Trustees and Alumni is an independent nonprofit organization that works in higher education reform. And we focus on what we call the 3 A's: academic freedom, academic excellence, and accountability. And we do this by working through several key audiences, which are right in our name, and that's trustees and alumni. And it's actually that latter audience that came first in our history. We were established in 1995 as the National Alumni Forum. The program that I direct is called the Fund for Academic Renewal, which is a program that advises higher education donors on their giving to help them avoid those pitfalls that we'll be discussing in greater depth today, so that they can achieve their philanthropic goals and have confidence that their intent will be honored. And we help donors through every step of the giving process. Most notably, perhaps, is helping them with their gift agreement. We work with a legal fellow named Andres Casares, who's with the firm Arnold & Porter based here in DC. We provide free legal consultation on a gift agreement, which I think is really, really important. And we're made possible by a generous gift from the Diana Davis Spencer Foundation, and a bit of an interesting origin story there. So Miss Spencer's father, Shelby Cullum Davis, made a very generous gift to Trinity College in 1976. And the family faced some pretty serious challenges to protecting his intent several decades later. So his gift supported the establishment of the Shelby Cullum Davis Professorship of American Business and Economic Enterprise. This gift was made in 1976. It was $750,000. By 2008, this had grown to over $13 million. It made up 3% of Trinity's total endowment. And Professor Gerald Gunderson held that chair since 1981, started to get a little suspicious over how the university was spending those funds. He talked about setting up another chair with the excess money, doing something like a lecture series, and he was told no, that there wasn't the funding available, which he thought was very odd given the size of the endowment. So he alerted the family to this. He also alerted the state attorney general. Fortunately, this has a happy ending. Those funds were restored. Mr. Davis's intent was protected and justice prevailed. But this experience was really formative for how the Diana Davis Spencer Foundation approaches their own higher education giving. They know these challenges firsthand, and we're so grateful that they made this program possible to help other donors through the process and have a champion on their side in case their intent is violated. So to address the second part of your question about nostalgia, I think that's absolutely right, and that can be a real stumbling block for donors, although I think what's happening with Carl and with the other members of the Alumni Free Speech Alliance show that there might be a mindset that's changing, and I think that's for the positive. So we always have to remind donors that they may have had a wonderful experience on campus several decades ago, but they really need to look with clear eyes at what the campus is today and evaluate it in the same way that they would with any other nonprofit as a place for them to give. And then the other stumbling block we run into with donors is that I think sometimes people underestimate how hard it can be to give thoughtfully. And giving should be a really joyful experience. So I want to make sure people don't, my job is not to suck the joy out of giving. I absolutely don't want to do that. But it can get tough when donors get close to the finish line. Sometimes universities will throw in arbitrary deadlines. They'll throw in clauses at the 11th hour to try to, I'm not sure why they do it, but it takes a little fortitude to get past the finish line. So we have to remind donors that it's worth it in the long run, but that kind of short, when you get close to the finish line, it can be a bit of a painful process.
I was listening to a podcast that Carl did. Gosh, it was early in January. Carl, I forget what organization was. I know we're going to have it up in the show notes. You really told the story in full there, and it was interesting. You broke down the dynamic of a school as students, faculty, administration, and I would like to add a fourth, unless we consider trustees part of administration. But to me, of course, that's the title, one of the words in the title of your organization, Emily. So this is, I want to get into trustees a little bit. Yeah, they exist. They are mostly donors themselves. You would think they'd be the kind of people who would be attuned to donor intent and the integrity and the need to protect it. And yet, where are they at the beginning of the day or the end of the day? So let me ask you, Richard, and we have a number of questions. By the way, if anyone wants to ask a question, there's a question function here somewhere, so you can ask it, and I'll try to get to it and answer it. Richard, in your experience with the University of Wisconsin, and then Carl, if you wouldn't mind adding on your end, what has been the experience with the trustees of the school? Wall of silence. Anyone feeling your pain? Geez, I wish I could help, but we can't. What's the experience been like?
My experience was negative overall. We wrote to all the trustees, all the regents multiple times and got no responses from them. But ultimately, and that included more than 70 executives in the three entities. Ultimately, Governor Tommy Thompson was appointed the interim president of the university system. And he wrote to me and he said he was disappointed with what had happened. He had his VP of finance look into the matter. But then the bureaucracy seemed to close in again, and the VP of Finance didn't issue an accurate statement as to what happened. So I personally think that the bureaucracy is so large and our issue is so small, they weren't about to pay attention to it. They were just going to turn the blind eye and let some other department or some other person deal with it. I didn't find much personal commitment out of any of the leadership.
Carl, before you answer, and because I want to, you didn't have Richard's experience, but Emily, let me just ask Emily, I mean, am I right? Does the buck not stop with trustees on all things for colleges? But shouldn't donor intent be something they're concerned with? Is it something that they just don't want to, they run and hide from it? Or, I assume you try to educate them as much as you educate potential donors. What's your experience, and what should we assume is the responsibility of trustees?
Yeah, so you are right, the buck stops with trustees. And I think in the abstract, trustees are really sympathetic to issues of donor intent. It's a really important reputational concern for the college. So whenever you talk about donor intent, trustees are generally on your side. They themselves are often donors. I think though they're a little bit less consistent when the rubber hits the road and there's an issue at their own college. It's the case where there's a perfectly valid explanation for this, or this is just an isolated incident. Part of this is where trustees are getting their information from. So if it's only from the university, if they're only hearing that side of the story, they may not be getting a full picture of the case and all of its nuances. So that's one thing that ACTA is really involved in, writing to boards of trustees directly. We have a database that has home addresses of 23,000 trustees. So we're not sending it to the university, we're sending it straight to their home address. They do serve a very important fiduciary responsibility. They're more than human rubber stamps from the president. So that's why ACTA works really hard to ensure that they're engaged and understand these responsibilities.
So, Carl, something that happened to Richard and his family is, we know about it now because of efforts such as Emily's organization, but it's not major news. What you have done with Cornell has become major news. So tell us a little more, if you don't mind, a little more detail, what the Cornell Free Speech Alliance does. And once that became public, what was the reaction of the trustees of Cornell, if anything? I'm making assumptions. Maybe some of them deal with you in some way, shape, or form. Have you heard anything from the true leadership of the college about the Free Speech Alliance?
Yeah, we're taking, for one of the debates, one of the fundamental debates, and we talked about at a recent conference that Emily and ACTA put on in Washington, D.C., is, if you're disapproving in some form or fashion with what's going on at your university, should you take a confrontational approach, or should you take sort of an approach to sort of be a friend to them and then get on the side of the university and try to pull them in a better direction? And I think we're trying to pursue the latter approach. However, we've had some challenges with that, because as soon as we announced ourselves, now Wall Street Journal article came out. It wasn't my idea, but the headline was, I didn't know what was going to be in that. I just told the story. What happened? Donors stopped giving to Cornell, and a big picture of the university and everything. I'm sure that I didn't get on their short list of favorite people, but they basically, I think, quickly gave it some attention, and then they started to object to our use of the name Cornell. They actually started to object to various photographs that we had. We created a website and put on the website of the campus. They objected to the fact that we had a sketch of the tower, which was sort of the symbol of Cornell, the McGraw Tower, and they even objected of the font and the color of the lettering that we used in our logo. So that came up, I would say, starting in November. I mean, within a month or so of the Wall Street Journal article, and we're still dealing with that stuff. They handed it off to their legal department, and we haven't even started to talk about some substantive issues. We're trying to engage with them, and what our goal is to switch from dealing with what university relations, which have a bunch of lawyers trying to protect their trademark and their other interests, to getting over onto the development side of the university, where we can have a more friendly approach. But we're still going through that process. So I would say that the university, we want to try to be friendly and try to improve the university. I think the university is very, very concerned about what our posture would be, because if you go to the website, it's clearly very critical about what's going on. But we're not offering a bunch of criticism. Myself, we have had the unusual circumstance of having a lot of faculty who have shared information and commented with us, written articles, written papers, and we have a litany of about 30 or 40 quotes from faculty and students about what's going on in the university, and it's awfully damning. And so when this gets published on the website, the university obviously has reputational concerns. So we're working on that, but we have to transition. One just quick comment about the trustees. I've never been a trustee. I'm not really familiar personally with the trustees, but from what we understand, there's a wide range in terms of how board of trustees work. The larger the board, usually the less power the board has, ironically, because there's so many people, very few people have a chance to really exercise a whole lot of authority or their views. And it really tends to gravitate to the power being with the administration. But I know at Cornell, and they've got a large board, 40 or so people. And from what we know, and from other people who know the board, we may have a couple, we may have 2 or 3 sympathetic ears out of 40. And so we want to approach the trustees, but we want to do it in the right way. We want to do it at the right time, and we want to see what kind of help we can get from those people. But I think the effort is going to be work with a few trustee members who may be sympathetic and buck them up with information and support, so they can try to make some things happen at the trustee level.
So let's talk a little more about the alliance, the broader alliance, and free speech as a driving issue for donor giving, whether that's true or not, because I think free speech means a lot of things. It's kind of a basket that has a lot of things in it, but there are any number of other potentially legitimate issues that drive. But back on the alliance, the Alumni Free Speech Alliance, the larger organization that Carl referred to earlier, that includes right now associated groups from Bucknell, Lafayette, MIT, UNC, VMI, Wofford, Yale, Washington and Lee, UVA, Princeton, Davidson. 110 schools, alumni from 110 schools have reached out. Carl, are you active in the larger alliance, and is its purpose now one more of still forming and organizing and being an outlet for people before it forms? I don't know that it has any alliance-wide project or mission. I mean, alliance is an alliance. It's individual groups, I guess. But can you talk about the larger alliance and
yeah, I
review
think
on its success?
So I'm on the board of the alliance. We currently have 12 board members from some of the founding schools. And I think the key thing, although I tend to lean, to the right, we don't want that to pollute the message, because we think that the desire to have free speech, viewpoint diversity, academic freedom on campuses is something that should be non-political. In other words, the whole full spectrum of viewpoints should be represented, and people of all political persuasions should care about those things. So I think the first thing to say is it's nonpartisan, and we think the success of it will come from being able to draw people on both sides, the left and right, certainly at least the mid part of the left, into thinking, hey, there's a problem. As a matter of fact, just this week or just last week, I haven't had a chance to read it, but there's a New York Times article finally saying universities have a problem with free speech. The New York Times. So that's a major. So, we're trying to make headway there. But at the moment, really what we're doing, it's a completely volunteer organization at the moment. We're working with Emily and ACTA, and we're working with FIRE, which is the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, to try to team with them to provide staff resources, raise our own monetary resources so we can do more. But at present, the effort really is just to help other groups, other alumni groups organize. There's a lot of things we want to do, but we can't do much unless we organize them. So help them get a set of bylaws, help them with their policies, help them with communications and outreach, with website and sort of development. So very sort of basic elements, the basic tools that they're going to need to try to organize themselves. As we go forward, as far as the overall mission, it's a three-pronged mission, three legs to the stool. One, again, the three things I just mentioned: freedom of speech, viewpoint diversity, and academic freedom. Those are three things, but all those things imply a huge undertaking at the university, because all those things are very much absent right now. How the AFSA will translate those goals into actual actions, implementable actions, remains to be seen. And I should say a lot of it is going to be based on what it is the individual university members want to do. So it'll be some combination of bottom up and top down. So all of it's in a very formative stage, but the good news is there seems to be a lot of momentum and a lot of desire to be for university groups to be a part of it and push the ball forward.
Okay, well, we're going to get into some practical alternatives for philanthropists, not just the pitfalls. Although I want to get back one last thing with you, Richard. You've got the lashes. You've been abused. Your family's been abused, and yet, I guess you have to continue to deal with the University of Wisconsin. They have the money. I know you through Tommy Thompson. You had a little bit of solace, but I'm wondering, you had to do it all over again, knowing what you do now about how fast and loose advancement offices play, minus some, written in stone contractual agreement. Would you still seek to create this a scholarship in honor of your father at University of Wisconsin, or would you try to found another means to honor him?
We would be open to both. Our problem has been there's nobody listening on the other side. So if we could turn to an ACTA, an exponent, American Philanthropic, if there was a mediary who could step in, who could help create a dialogue, a balanced dialogue, that would greatly help. But when we did our donation, starting with the commitment in 2013 and delivering the cash 5 years ago, we didn't know of third parties who could be helpful. We certainly didn't anticipate or expect. We thought philanthropy was a bifurcated donor, steward, trust, dignity. Everybody gets along and works it out. In fact, it obviously didn't work the way we did it, even though we believe our documents are sound and legal.
Emily, let's look at a couple of the tactics, which may be not the best word, but that a philanthropist who's determined to give to an alma mater, even if it's gone awry, 50 years after someone graduated, and I don't know many colleges that haven't gone awry in the last 50 years, but I know there's. First of all, and we'll broaden this out. There are folks who have founded kind of affiliated institutions, appendages, quasi-independent, some of them, two existing colleges. Case in point, I know it's they are legally different college to college, but we have the Madison Center at Princeton, which is of course anchored around a great faculty member. You need great faculty members in order to have these institutions be worthwhile. So we have that as an alternative for determined donors. Let's talk about that. And then there's another tactic about, I'll give to you, but I'm going to name a secondary college. So is my Luca Brazzi on the side to enforce proper donor intent here. So let's talk about the Madison centers. Columbia has Morningside, Abigail Adams is at Harvard, et cetera. How difficult are those things to pull off? And then, Carl, I'm going to ask you about if you've thought about that as an alternative for your own case with Cornell. But go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, so I think those are really excellent options for donors. And we have a list on Active's website. We call these oases of excellence, when there's a really excellent faculty member who's building a unique program on their campus that brings some intellectual diversity, ensures that students are studying things like civics, American history. There's a whole range of them. And I think this is a really great option for donors. One of our key pieces of advice is to find a faculty friend on campus. So you want to have allies that you trust who are on campus, who understand your vision, who share it, who want to see it enacted. That's one of the best guarantors of a donor's intent. We also, to the extent that we can, we encourage year-to-year funding whenever you find that person. Faculty do tend to stay in place for a long time. There's a lot of turnover at the administrative level. Ideally, you have a faculty member you trust and a dean. The faculty member might stay for a long time, but they won't stay forever. So if you're thinking about an endowed gift or bequest, we really encourage you to think about year-to-year funding as a much safer route.
So that's really not an endowment, right? Year-to-year funding just can't.
No, I mean, you could give to a donor advised. So if you want to give all at once, give to a donor advised fund or set up your own charitable trust. But I wouldn't give that endowment to the university foundation if there's any way you can avoid it. And I say this and people still do it, but I always need to offer that word of caution.
Carl, have those thoughts crossed your mind at Cornell now or even in the past?
Well, I mean, a couple of things, on giving. So that we're trying to identify, and we have identified certain programs that are focused on our mission, particularly free speech and even just fundamental democratic principles, that we can give to. There are a couple of things at Cornell. You can do that and specify it specifically for that purpose, that are run by faculty members that we think are well aligned to us. The other thing is there's certain affiliated organizations that are completely separate from Cornell, but nevertheless are affiliated. So I can write a check to Cornell. In that case, let's say a religious ministry or something like that. I can write a check to Cornell, and then 100% of that money just leaves Cornell and goes into other hands. And so that we've been able to do. And then I think the other thing is we're thinking of ways of developing our own programming. So we are, one thing that's not happening, of course, at universities now is debate, open debate, where different viewpoints can be expressed and be heard. We don't want to just, obviously a lot of conservative viewpoints are missing on campus right now, but we don't want to, there are plenty of organizations that are trying to try to counter that with a steady stream of conservative speakers, but we're trying to be nonpartisan. So we're trying to model for the students how to have civil discourse and how to have people on opposite ends of the spectrum who can speak to issues and have forums, debate forums for students and activities. I don't know if you saw this week, there's quite a row at Yale Law School because a mob canceled a debate on the subject of free speech, where you had we had someone from the far left and someone from the left and someone from the right discussing free speech, and the topic of free speech being debated on campus or discussed on campus was canceled. It's not acceptable.
Yeah.
So,
well,
this is how far it was.
My office here is 10 miles from Yale, and the most interesting thing, it's national news, but the local news is not covering this great assault on free speech in the New Haven neighborhood. It's kind of quite embarrassing. Emily, back to you on this other tactics.
The Luca Brazzi method.
Yeah, how does that work? And is there anything else? Part of this point of this webinar is to inform potential donors. What other ways are there out there for donors to seek extraordinary protections for their intent?
Yeah, so the one that you referenced, the Luca Brasi method. So this is designated an alternative beneficiary. And this is a method that Sherlock Hibbs employed with great success. And I always love using it because he has a great name. But he made a gift of $5 million to the University of Missouri. And then he empowered Hillsdale College to oversee that gift. So every year, Missouri had to send a report to Hillsdale about how they were fulfilling Sherlock Hibbs's bequest. And then if anything were to happen with this gift, if Hillsdale didn't think they were honoring it, they would have the power to reclaim that gift. So what I really like about this is that it gives Hillsdale College the power to take this to court. And one thing that very few donors understand is that a gift is not a contract. So if things go south, it's not like a donor can necessarily bring this to court. They may or may not have standing to enforce the terms of the gift agreement, which sadly is something that Richard has discovered firsthand. This is really the purview of the state attorney general. It's up to them whether or not to act. So the Sherlock Hibbs method skirts around that entirely by empowering this other beneficiary to step in and sue over the gift.
Do you find that is, though, that's an anecdote, but is really, it's just an anecdote, or are other donors using it? Because the initial college has to accept that as a premise.
So it's tricky because you really have to make sure that you're empowering the right oversight here. It needs to be something that's very well established, and definitely have a conversation with them in advance and see what resources they might need to actually enforce this, because not every nonprofit organization is going to have the resources to take something like a University of Missouri to court. Hillsdale was really the perfect choice for this donor. It aligned with his vision. They clearly had the resources to pursue justice on his behalf, but you have to be careful in terms of who you choose. We have had donors use what we call a clawback provision. So there's a tripwire within the gift agreement where it says if university doesn't do XYZ by such and such date, the gift will revert back to the family foundation. So that's another strategy to employ. It's a little bit cleaner. You avoid the tax headache of getting a gift returned to you as an individual. Luckily, they haven't had to use it, but it's nice to have in the gift agreement.
We only have about 10 minutes left. I want to ask a couple of quick questions. Richard, Emily mentioned the Attorney General as the real, that's the key person in these kind of problems. You would know that better than anyone. Did you have any interaction with the Wisconsin Attorney General on what happened to your donation, and in short story, what happened, if anything?
You may be pressing it. I can't speak to what we may or may not yet do with the Attorney General in the state of Wisconsin, but I can tell you that we were in contact with 5 committees of the State House and State Senate and their chair people, and we brought these issues to the legislative attention.
Did you get was there positive response? Were there hearings, or it's just that?
No,
point?
We were told there would be hearings, and there were no hearings.
Okay. My understanding, and Emily, you're on this every day, is that there were, maybe even laws have been signed in Ohio. There was was it Moritz? Is that the case of another terrible abuse of a donation? And I believe that the state legislature has responded. I don't know if it's become law yet, but.
So it's not, and we had bad news on that front actually this morning. Oh. So the Senate passed it's SB 135, Senate Bill 135. It's currently in the House, and the version that the House is looking at now removed all of the donor intent language. So who knows what's going to happen, but right now that's not looking so positive.
Not just very quickly, I would think lawmakers probably have state legislators probably have allegiances to the state college associations for any number of reasons. So it must be a hard thing to press through legislature. If I may get back to the issue of free speech, and Carl, everything is. It's called the Free Speech Alliance, so it is about free speech. This is too much of a hypothetical, but we went on free speech. Whoever we is, and Cornell is teaching free speech. But meanwhile, Marxism is tromping its way through the classrooms. I don't know how that dynamic would ever work out. I don't think it would actually happen in reality. But nevertheless, I think there are other important issues that not aren't in the free speech basket that motivate donor intent, donor donations or caution to giving to alma maters. So do you see that coming up at all in Cornell? And Emily, then to you, like what other issues are triggering donors? And maybe free speech is the issue that's overwhelming all others.
Just a comment, and Emily knows Emily is helping to educate me on something. As I've gotten, first of all, I'm an engineer and a businessman. I spent my life on my business, and I'm really not a terribly sophisticated political thinker or cultural thinker. But what I've discovered in recent years, what's dawned on me is it's not limited to free speech. What's really happening, I think, and Emily has shared some information with me to help educate me, but really what we have happening, I think, is really a very strong pushback that is really anti-Western tradition, perhaps you might say anti-Western civilization, that is occurring at universities. And a lot of things are funneling into that, including, Western culture being supplanted by multiculturalism. And so but what this viewpoint at universities has become so dominant. At Cornell, 99.5%, the Cornell Daily Sun, which is a liberal newspaper, 99.5% of the donations are given to one political party from 5,000 people on the faculty and staff, 99.5%. So what that tells you is there's a groupthink that's occurring. And in my view, I've come to learn it's in multiple ways, a very anti-Western groupthink. Obviously, free speech is a Western freedom, and freedom of religion and those sorts of things. But the reason why it's coming to the fore, I view free speech. We're on the 1 yard line. We're on our own 1 yard line, and we're waking up as to where we are. There's 99 yards that we've gone, and it's a very long fight to push back. And the reason why it's the last yard that the university groupthink needs to take to get into the goal line. And because if free speech is the way to counter, is the only way to counter all of those things that are being said and taught and happening on campus. If you get rid of free speech, you have no other voice, you have no counter, and then the victory is won. The problem is free speech is just the tip of the iceberg, and there's a very long, hard fight, I think, for the next generation to try to win back our universities, and it remains to be seen whether it will be successful.
I'm going to get in big trouble with my overlords if I don't tell everyone who's watching very quickly. 2 days from now, March 24th, we have Scotch Talk webinars, and Jeremy Beer, the founder of American Philanthropic, is hosting it. It's on capital campaigns. I'm sure there are a lot of people watching here who are interested in college affiliated capital campaigns in college. They go together. It's 4:00 Eastern time. If you go to centerforcivilsociety.com, and you'll find the events link and sign up for free. Bring your own beer. We bring Jeremy beer. You bring your own beer. And then also on April 6th in Winter Park, Florida, full day conference. We are sponsoring. We are hosting the Center for Civil Society. It's on democracy and philanthropy in America. Senator Ben Sasse is speaking. Heather Higgins. Plenty of panels. Is there too much politics and philanthropy? A host of some great donors who are going to talk about how and why they give and give well. So if you go to centerforcivilsociety.com and look for the link for the conference, and do consider it. April 6th in Winter Park, Florida. So I have one quick question, Emily. This came up in a conversation yesterday. Boy, you talk about donor intent. It's a foundation that gives brick and mortar, and we want to build buildings, and the buildings have a name on it, and the content inside the building has to be about free enterprise. And how do we protect that 10 or 15 years from now if the college decides to start teaching Marxism in a free enterprise building? What's the recourse? I didn't have an answer. I mean, trust is trust. And but have you come across anything like this?
Yeah, so I mean, starting something from scratch is always, I think, the most difficult, but the payoff can be so big, and it really brings something much needed to campus. So I would say, I mean, finding the right people is important. I would have a really good advisory board as well, and as much authority as you can possibly give them. That's something that's going to be tough to negotiate with the university, but having the right people on that advisory board could make a big difference.
Okay. Emily, I do want to note that you have the Active publishes the Intellectual Donors Guide to College Giving. We have a link to it.
Oh,
there you
thanks,
go.
Richard.
There it
Richard's
is, Jeff.
story is in there.
Thank you.
So third edition, you must be doing something right if you keep publishing it. So I want to recommend to our folks who are viewing to check that out. It's very, very readable and very informative. We have 3 minutes left. So in leaving, I'd like to give everyone 1 minute. I think we're all advisors in a way to college giving. We have our own experiences. Some are much more intimately involved. Some have the lashes, as you do, Richard. Even I have had experience of sidetracking someone who was going to give a significant gift to a college, and it ended up in one of these associated institutions. You have one bit of advice to give to somebody when it comes to donor intent. What is it? Richard, you got 30 seconds. What would you say?
I'd say pause. The instinct is to immediately make a contribution and act. But I would say pause, talk to institutions, talk to an actor, talk to others, talk to American Philanthropic, read, learn from these case studies, and one will find solutions that can help preclude problems. It might even include sending out a request for proposal before making a donation, making the institutions put on the table in a competitive fashion what they would offer if you gave them, in our case, 500,000, and then converting that into, if you will, a Moritz kind of contract, or back it up with a Hillsdale. But
Okay.
Don't jump. Take your time.
Carl, any advice to the potential donor?
Well, I think money is important for its PR aspect, but I think at the end of the day, Cornell has $12 billion endowment. I'm a graduate of Harvard. They have $50 billion. I mean, even a 100 millionaire who's going to hold back his gift, maybe it's a weekend of interest. I don't know. But so I think the key thing, I think reputational things are very important to the university. And I think the giving is part of that. But I think I've seen a lot of alumni who are pissed off, excuse my French, at the university, and they've stopped giving, but they haven't said a thing to the university.
Yeah.
The university is not aware that they're not giving and why they're not giving. So my advice would be pause, as Richard says, and if you don't cut off your giving in general, just pull it back and then be sure you communicate. Whether you're giving $100 a year, $100,000 a year, $1 million a year, communicate to the university why it is that you're pulling back in a respectful manner. And I think if they hear enough of those voices, it can have an impact.
Emily, we're almost out of time. 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
One piece of
Okay.
advice.
So I would say first, don't write a blank check. Conditional love only when it comes to the alma mater. Be sure to target your giving and find allies on campus who understand and share your vision.
You got 4 suggestions in 15 seconds.
Quick.
That was terrific. Hey, Richard, Carl, Emily, I want to thank you very much. You provided a lot of great information here and advice. We'll be sending out links to various things that you folks have done to our participants today, those who've watched. We thank you. We'll be back in another month with another great webinar from the Center for Civil Society. And please feel free to contact us if you have any questions, you want to do any follow-up with any of our participants, we will send them your questions. I'm Jack Fowler. I'm the director. I thank you very much. God bless, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Jack.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.